The campfire crackled, throwing long, dancing shadows against the dense wall of trees. Amelia sat closest to the flames, watching the embers drift upward into the dark canopy. Tina, Strawberry, and Vamp were nearby, their movements slow and relaxed as the night air cooled the clearing. The forest was quiet, save for the rhythmic popping of burning wood. Then, the silence broke. A high-pitched whine, like tearing metal, ripped through the atmosphere. The space directly above the clearing fractured. A jagged, blocky rift tore open in the sky, bleeding a harsh neon light that washed out the campfire's glow. The four of them scrambled to their feet, hands flying to their weapons. The light intensified, pulsing with a rhythmic, electric hum that made the ground beneath them vibrate. Before anyone could shout, the rift buckled. A figure tumbled out of the void, spinning through the air before slamming into the dirt with a sharp, distinct plastic clatter. The object lay motionless in the center of the clearing, surrounded by the fading, flickering neon light of the rift above. Amelia stepped forward, her blade held low, eyes locked on the small, unmoving shape in the grass. The figure did not stay down. It pushed against the soil, limbs snapping into place with a series of sharp, rhythmic clicks. Amelia held her ground, watching as the entity rose to its full height, barely 6 inches tall. It was a man, but constructed entirely from yellow plastic bricks. The group tightened their circle, weapons still drawn, eyes scanning the clearing for further threats. The small man turned his head, a stiff, mechanical motion that lacked the fluid grace of a living creature. He stood firm, his posture rigid, showing no sign of fear. Tina shifted her weight, her grip on her spear loosening as she looked at the others. Amelia lowered her sword, the steel tip scraping the grass. She gestured for the group to stand down. The tension in the air shifted from defensive hostility to wary curiosity. Strawberry and Vamp exchanged a look, then nodded in silent agreement. They saw the resolve in the small figure. The four of them stepped back, clearing a path for him to join the circle. By the time the neon rift had faded, the group had accepted him. Dawn broke over the canopy, painting the forest in pale, muted grays. The 5 of them moved as one, trekking through the undergrowth toward the forbidden dungeon. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, with tangled roots and slick, moss-covered stones forcing them to slow their pace. Mark kept up with the others, his plastic limbs clicking rhythmically against the uneven ground. He navigated the debris with surprising agility, darting over obstacles that forced the rest of the group to climb. As the sun climbed higher, the forest canopy thickened, blotting out the light. The air grew still, losing the morning chill and taking on a heavy, stagnant quality. Then, the trees parted. Before them loomed the forbidden dungeon. It was a massive, jagged structure embedded into the side of a sheer cliff face. The entrance was a gaping stone maw, dark and wide, exhaling a faint, cold draft that smelled of damp earth and ancient, undisturbed dust. Without a word, the group stepped forward, crossing the stone lip and leaving the forest behind as they descended into the suffocating darkness of the depths. The darkness inside the dungeon was absolute, broken only by the faint, rhythmic glow of Mark's plastic frame. As they pushed deeper, the stone walls began to vibrate. From the crevices above, shadowy shapes detached themselves, coalescing into jagged, humanoid forms. They surged forward, a wave of cold, shifting smoke. Amelia swung her blade, the steel whistling through empty air as the shadows dodged and reformed. Tina and Strawberry braced their backs against the damp masonry, spears leveled to hold the line, but the mobs were relentless. They swarmed, clawing at the group with fingers made of solidified gloom. Then, a sharp, mechanical click cut through the chaos. Mark darted forward, moving with a frantic, blurring speed that the larger enemies could not track. He slipped between the legs of a towering shadow, his tiny, jagged blade flashing in the gloom. He struck at the base of the creature's knee, shattering its form into harmless mist. Within moments, the corridor was clear. The last of the mobs dissipated into the damp air, leaving the group standing in the sudden, heavy silence. They pushed through the final archway and stepped into the inner sanctum. The space opened up into a cavernous rotunda, the ceiling lost in impenetrable shadow. The air here felt different, heavy with the metallic tang of old iron and the dry, brittle scent of ancient bone. Amelia signaled for a halt, her eyes scanning the perimeter. The floor was littered with the remnants of past intruders, crushed stone and rusted shards. Suddenly, the ground beneath them lurched. A deep, grinding sound echoed from the center of the chamber, vibrating through the soles of their boots. A massive pile of debris shifted, rising upward, to reveal the form of a towering construct. It was a jagged assembly of iron plates and bleached bone, held together by a pulsing, unnatural energy. The creature straightened, its height scraping the vaulted ceiling, and let out a roar that sent dust raining down from the cavern walls. The sheer force of the sound knocked the group back, forcing them to shield their faces from the debris. The construct turned, its glowing eyes locking onto them. The walls shuddered again, cracks spiderwebbing across the stone floor as the beast took a heavy, deliberate step forward. The path back was blocked by falling rubble. The construct lunged, a mountain of iron and bone collapsing forward with terrifying speed. Amelia and the others dove to the sides, scrambling across the uneven stone as the beast's massive limbs slammed into the ground. Dust and shards of rock exploded into the air, obscuring the chamber. Through the swirling debris, Mark saw it, a deep, pulsating ruby embedded directly into the center of the creature's chest, glowing with a rhythmic internal heat. Mark did not hesitate. He sprinted toward the beast, his small plastic feet clicking sharply against the stone floor. He reached the creature's massive, jointed leg and used the protruding iron plates as a ladder. He climbed with frantic, mechanical precision. Mark reached the height of its chest. He launched himself into the air, a tiny, yellow blur against the dark, jagged plates. His fingers stretched out, straining to close around the cold, hard surface of the gem. He collided with the chest, his grip locking onto the ruby. The air in the chamber turned white as the fire surged forward. Then, the motion stopped. The roar of the beast cut out, replaced by a sudden, absolute silence. Dust motes hung suspended in the air like frozen stars. A translucent, glowing interface flickered into existence directly in front of Mark. It displayed a grid of complex symbols and flashing buttons, a digital prompt offering a sequence to dodge the incoming blast. Mark hovered in the air, his fingers still locked onto the ruby. He stared at the interface, the neon light reflecting off his plastic eyes. The sequence was clear, a path to safety that would drop him clear of the flames. He looked at the buttons, then back at the massive, glowing maw of the construct. He did not reach out. He did not move his fingers to the grid. Instead, he pulled his legs tight and planted his feet firmly against the iron plates of the boss's chest. He braced his frame, locking his joints into a rigid, unyielding stance. He stared directly into the building inferno, his jaw set in a line of hard, plastic defiance. The interface pulsed, waiting for an input that would never come. Mark tightened his grip on the gem, leaned into the heat, and muttered, "Fuck." The world shuddered. The interface shattered into 1,000 shards of light. Time resumed with a deafening roar. The fireball slammed into him, a wall of searing heat that swallowed the chamber in blinding light. Mark felt the force of the blast tear through his frame, sending him tumbling through the air like a discarded toy. He skidded across the cold stone floor, his plastic casing scorched and blackened, the surface bubbling under the intense thermal pressure. But the impact had done its work. The kinetic energy of the explosion, channeled through his grip, had driven the ruby deep into the boss's internal mechanism. A high-pitched metallic screech echoed through the cavern as the gem fractured. The construct let out a final, distorted roar that shuddered through the floorboards. Its glowing eyes flickered, dimmed, and then went dark. The iron and bone plates holding the beast together began to warp and buckle. With a sound like a collapsing building, the giant lost its cohesion. The heavy iron limbs buckled, The bone joints snapped, and the entire construct disintegrated into a chaotic heap of rubble. Mark lay motionless in the center of the debris, a small, dark shape amidst the ruins of the monster he had helped destroy. Hours later, the trek back to the clearing felt longer than the journey to the dungeon. The forest was dark, the canopy thick enough to block the moonlight, leaving only the faint, flickering glow of their campfire to guide them. They reached the site and collapsed. Mark lay on a makeshift bed of leaves, his plastic frame dented, scorched, and missing pieces of his shoulder. He did not move. Tina sat beside him, her hands steady as she applied a cooling, viscous salve to his joints. Each touch caused a faint, mechanical clicking sound, a reminder of the damage sustained in the sanctum. Amelia, Strawberry, and Vamp sat nearby, their weapons laid out on the dirt, their breathing slow and heavy. Nobody spoke. The silence of the woods, once a source of tension, now felt like a reprieve. The fire popped, sending a spray of orange sparks into the cool night air. The heat from the flames washed over them, drying the sweat and grime of the dungeon floor. Amelia watched the embers, her gaze fixed on the shifting light. Strawberry leaned back against a tree, eyes closed, listening to the wind move through the branches. The danger had passed, leaving only the physical weight of the day. Mark's chest rose and fell in a rhythmic, mechanical hum as the salve began to harden over his blackened casing. The fire burned low, the logs turning to white ash. One by one, the group drifted into sleep, the forest floor holding them still. The last of the flames flickered, dimmed, and finally died, leaving them in the quiet dark.